Hello, and welcome to episode number 346 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, The Red Tank. I have never missed an episode, and I'm joined today by Mark, the Green Tank.
Also never missed an episode.
Also never missed an episode. And then today we are absent, our most flightful friend, our least faithful friend,
Chronic.
Neelan.
This is a chronic issue with Neelan, and we're going to have to talk
always the case.
Yep.
We all have different jobs, and it turns out Neelan's job is telling us what number episode we are on, because Mark and I could not figure it out. We could not do it. It was just not possible. So, Neelan, we miss you already. You know, you can add 1 to 1 and then get us to the next number, 346.
We were that close to not being able to record the episode because we were just so paralyzed by not knowing where we were in the count, and we were about to give up, and Kellen did some arithmetic and figured it out, fortunately.
I can be the backup, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not the guy, but if the guy is sick or otherwise unfaithful in this instance, I can do it. Today, we're going to talk about board games. We're going to talk about pricing. Price fixing. Not price fixing. Maybe MSRPs, pricing. Yeah, we're going to wade right in. Neelan said, don't talk about dollars, and we said, well, we'll wait until you're gone, and 340 episodes later, 46, as they say. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the games we've been playing. Mark, you're going to tell us about The Presents.
The Presents.
And then I am going to cover The River of Gold. Mark,
speaking of money,
let's get right into it. No wasted time.
Let's do it.
The Presents.
Yes.
The Present. That's not what we're talking about.
No, that's another game. But The Presents is a game I got to check out, and this was, for listeners with sharp ears out there, Neelan's number 2 most anticipated Essen game, as heard again on our last episode. Actually, Kellen, I'm going to be honest with the listeners here. The real reason that Neelan wasn't on this episode is he was so upset that I got to play The Presents before him that he refused to
How did you do this? Is actually, he's upset. He's pissed off. We get that. But how did you acquire The Presents? Did you travel to Germany?
I acquired it basically just because I knew Neelan wanted it.
Oh, perfect.
I'm like Daniel Plainview.
A spite acquire.
Yeah, whatever another man wants, I want. So, got a chance to play The Presents. This was a review copy provided to us by Purple Lantern Games and designed by...
You're doubling down here.
Yeah, exactly.
You got them. They shipped you the copy, not
That's exactly right.
The copy?
Exactly. That's the way I work.
How does this even happen?
That's the way I work.
We'd love to see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, this again was a copy given to us by Purple Lantern Games and designed by Sam Gullman. For those who don't remember or who, like me, were listening to Neelan's description of The Presents, let me fill you in. The Presents is a one maybe versus all game set in a horror haunted house. So perfectly timed for this spooky season that we find ourselves in. There's a lot that's going on in The Presents. Before I get into the bones of it, I just want to call attention to how beautiful and evocative of the horror theme this game is. I've mentioned before that I'm generally not a big fan of games that are dark, as in visually dark. Something like Brass Birmingham being a rare exception to that rule. Well, you can now add The Presents to that list of exceptions. And this is, of course, partly due to the fact that the theme is a horror theme. You wouldn't really want a bright, pastel-y horror game. But more than that, the art is really, really great, and the components are really nice, and all that really helps to make the experience, again, more evocative. So a big, big thumbs up on that. And again, because the game is so thematic, the art and all that really helps in a way that it might not for other, just like, plain Euro games. So let's get into the game. I mentioned before that this is a sorta one versus all game. You're going to have one player playing as the ghost and everyone else acting as people exploring this haunted house. The semi-co-op nature that I was alluding to comes from the fact that the ghost player might be trying to win with the players or might be going against the players. At the start of the game, let's call it either the evil ghost or the good ghost's win conditions are going to be visible to the players based on the scenario you're playing. So before the game even starts, you're going to have in front of you all the good ghost win conditions and all the evil ghost win conditions, and you're not going to be able to tell until certain inflection points whether you're playing against an evil ghost or a good ghost, but you'll have an idea of what they're going for based on these cards. With that, there is a round-based timer that the players are going to be working against. Every round, that the players play, the round tracker is going to move up, and it's going to be approaching another token on the track. And once they meet, the game will probably end with the players losing. There also will be effects that cause that target timer to move closer to the player's round marker. So there's this constant time pressure, constant race against the clock. Anyhow, the bones of how this game actually works and is played is basically an action point system where the players are going to get 3 actions per round. Everyone has the same basic actions like moving, opening and closing doors, which more about that later. You might ask why I'm specifying an action like opening and closing doors, but it's more important than you might think. But what you want to do is, instead of taking these basic actions, is using your clue cards, these clue cards you have in your hand, to take more efficient actions. So while you might normally take a full action to move 1 space, if you use a clue card, it might say, if you use this action for movement, you get 2 movement points. So the cards are going to provide a more efficient use of your actions in every aspect, not just movement, but most aspects of the game. You're going to be more efficient using these clue cards rather than actually using your basic actions. The cards they're using are called clue cards because of the other big mechanism in the game. Because the other thing the players are trying to do is to uncover 4 secrets. This is a little tricky to describe, but there are 4 secrets tied to the 4 different suits of cards that the clue cards come in. So the clue cards that you're going to be using for most of the game come in 4 suits. When you discard these clue cards, you're going to discard them into one of these 4 secret piles, these 4 secrets you're trying to uncover. Usually there's no way to know which secret has been assigned to which pile, so each secret is assigned to a different suit. So when you discard them, there's no real way to know which secret is assigned to which suit, except of all the clue cards that the players can draw during the course of the game, the first secret are going to have the fewest cards, and the 4th secret, all the way up to the 4th secret, which is going to have the most cards in the pile of cards you're going to be able to draw. What this means is that the players are going to need to figure out which suit of cards they see the most of as they play the game, or the least of, in order to deduce where to assign these cards when they're discarded. So if you see a lot of one suit, you might say, okay, we see a lot of these, so this is probably the 4th secret, whereas if another suit is much more rare, it's most likely the 1st secret.
But wait, can people be lying about this? Because, right, one of them might not be on your team?
No, so the players are always working together, but there is an intercommunication thing. I'm glad you brought that up. So this does mean a lot of discussion between the players, and as I mentioned, this brings up the other big hook of the game, the communication rules. So players are allowed to fully discuss everything they want if they're in the same room as one another, or if they're in adjacent rooms separated by open doors. Okay, if
they can
not,
yell, and then the rule is you have to yell if you're between the 2 rooms.
Right, but if you're not, if you're separated by a closed door, if you're farther away, there is a very strict no discussion policy. You can't give any information out, and because you're on this timer that I mentioned earlier, this really tight timer, and because you need to get a lot done, you're not going to be able to play this game in a way that you're staying together. You're going to be forced to separate to get a lot of stuff done because there's not much time. But also, the counterbalance to that is, while you are running around separately to get things done, you also are going to find it really, really important to communicate what cards you've seen, because that's the biggest way to win in the game, is to try to figure out which cards belong to which secret. After players take their turn, the ghost player is going to take their actions based on their own hand of cards, which they can use based on their spirit levels throughout the house, which are represented by these chunky blue dice. So the ghost player is going to be moving these dice around in order to take actions in specific rooms. And if they can dial these dice up, they can take more powerful actions. And if they can't, if they are forced to keep the dice low and their power levels low, they're going to be limited to the extent of the actions they can take on their card. That's basically the summary of the presence. There are a lot of variability, though, in this, because, as I mentioned, the scenario that you play is going to be dictating which are the win conditions for the good ghost and what are the win conditions for the bad ghost. There are also going to be a lot of variability in terms of what the players are going to need to do to succeed, and that's going to add a lot of scenario-specific gameplay options. And there's even a legacy aspect if you want to play a full campaign. I should say campaign more than legacy. There's a campaign aspect to the game, which is going to be building up from one scenario to the next. So, did I like the presence? I will say that I did. So when you get games like this that are so thematically based, that rely so much on the thematic aspect of the game, I think you often fall into one of two scenarios. Either it's so thematic or it's so focused on the thematic that the gameplay is lackluster, or you have a situation where the gameplay is solid, but the thematic aspect of it feels sort of pasted on. I think The Presence walks a really, really good line here where it feels like a full-fledged, solid strategy game, maybe to its detriment. I'll talk more about that later, but like it is a rock-solid, really interesting board game for quote-unquote board gamers, but also the thematic aspect of it is great. It's like really, really thematically evocative.
And that's kind of surprising, right? Because you would almost assume that it's going to go way too evocative and then mechanically be not sound.
100%.
Right? Like that's like first time designer, first time Kickstarter. I mean, I may not have all the details right, but that would be the assumption when you just look at it.
And that was honestly my assumption going into the game. Like whenever I see a game that is obviously so heavily into the thematic aspect of it, I always figure that it's going to, lose something in the gameplay. And that was not the case with The Presence. Now, on the flip side, I will say that, first of all, the setup is fairly involved. The Ghost player has to set up a lot of things before the game. There's a lot of pieces based on where the secrets are. Again, I mentioned like the Secret 1 has the fewest cards and Secret 4 has the most cards, and the Ghost player has to set up the deck to satisfy that. And there's like a lot of pieces, and the setup is a little bit of a bear. Not too bad, but there is that to it. The other part, though, is that it is a fairly heavy game. And so when you have a thematic game, I think part of the draw of a thematic game is like, oh, this is like a fun game, a spooky game, and we're going to be able to get right into it and start playing, and it's going to be like a really fun, spooky sort of thing, or, whatever the thematic draw is. There's much more to get this game than that. Like, this is not going to be a game where you can like say, oh, it's a, Halloween, or it's like winter or something, and it's a dark night. Let's just break out a quick game of The Presence and I'll teach you how to play and we can go. This is going to be an involved rules explanation for sure. And so this is not going to be a game, in my opinion, that you're going to be able to play with like friends who are not really into board games or don't have a lot of experience with board games, because they may be a little overwhelmed by the amount of stuff in there. I think the rules are done really well. I think the rule book is great in general, and I think things are more or less intuitive, but it is, I think there's no denying it is quite a heavy game, relatively speaking, to other, I think, thematic games. But that said, if you have a gamer group, if your regular group aren't afraid of like medium heavy games, is looking for a thematic experience and is looking for a game that has really interesting mechanisms, like semi-co-op is a mechanism you don't see all the time. This like trying to figure out what suit you're seeing the most of and the least of is an interesting thing that I haven't seen in many games that I can think of. The communication rules are also an interesting thing where communication is so important and yet limited in this interesting way. Another thing in terms of like a con potentially, like for a thematic game, again, you're going to find yourself separated from your group a lot, and then there's like a lot of no talking, and there's a tension there, and it's like a big relief when people get together and you can like start talking. But in general, with a thematic game, you do want to talk to people around the table, and this game is like forcing you, for good reasons, is forcing you to not communicate. So that can be a little bit of a weird thing, but all in all, I think this is like really, really well done. I think it seems to me, not knowing anything about the backstory or the history of the design of this game, it seems to me really hitting the mark for what they were probably going after. Again, that balance between thematic and solid gameplay is really, really tough to get at, and I think they have here. But it is, I think, know what kind of game it is going in and if it's for your group. But the biggest concern for me would be like people going in thinking this is like a light romp, and it's not. This is not, for example, a game that I think it gets probably compared to a lot, Betrayal on House of the Hill. Like that's like a more light Scooby-Doo adventure horror sort of game, and I think you can get that one started fairly quickly, and it's like rip-roarious and like silly. This is much more in depth than that, much more like, I don't want to say complicated, but there's more to it than something like that.
But like, okay, I'm just lost in the sauce a little bit.
Sure.
So you, Christina, and Neelan are on a team, and you guys know that I'm the ghost.
That's correct.
And theologically, you don't know, if I'm a good ghost or I'm trying to you.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. But we know what the good ghost is going for. Yes. So for example, there could be two good ghost goals.
If I was a good ghost.
Yeah, there might be two good ghost goals, and like the good ghost wants A or B scenarios to happen, whereas if you're a bad ghost, they're looking for scenario C or D to happen.
And so is it the same tension that exists in Archipelago where you're like, is this person about to betray us all and they actually want the island to revolt? Like, it's not that tense, right?
It's not that tense.
I assume,
no, it is
but
not
it is
tense.
It's semi co-op.
Right, but I think with Archipelago there is the feeling going into that game where like if one player wants to tank the situation, they can. That you really have to work together to avoid that. Whereas with the Presence, in my limited experience, a good ghost is going to be playing good the entire game, and a bad ghost is probably going to be playing good early on to have the players off their track sort of situation. And this is a game where there's a lot of, why would a good ghost do that? And the argument the good ghost can make, obviously the ghost cannot talk while the game is being played, but there's a lot of, this is the best I could do. Like there's a lot of like drawing a token from the bag and you have to assign it, and the argument could be, they put this in here because they had no other choice. That was like all they could do. So there's a lot of like plausible deniability situations.
Sure. I like the idea of this just because it feels like super out of left field a little bit in terms of like, but maybe even born out of it. Again, we can't ascribe meaning here, but like Betrayal does have these sort of scenarios where it's just like, and then there's a whatever, and like, this is a really specific, we're all on a team together. That guy's either a liar or he's trying to help us.
Right.
And we're trying to go through the haunted house. Like, I think that's fun. So you think that, like, obviously the four of us running it together would have zero problems from like a heaviness perspective. You're
100%.
just concerned for like,
like this is not like heavy to the point of like only like as people who like heavy games will enjoy it. It's not that heavy. What it sort of felt to me, like it's so easy to make this comparison, but like Betrayal, it feels like a little bit like again, quote unquote gamer played Betrayal House on the Hill, liked it, but wanted to make it more of a real, like quote unquote real like strategy game, but keeping some of the thematic thing to it. So yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds fun. I think it's too bad we're not all hanging out on Halloween.
Yeah, it's true. Very true. Mostly Nealon's fault. So that, again, is The Presence, published by Purple Lantern Games, designed by Sam Gullman. And again, this was a review copy sent to us by Purple Lantern.
It's people are going to realize that the only thing that keeps us kind is also Nealon.
Right.
But I don't know. Okay, I had a chance to play River of Gold. So this was a really hot game coming out of last year, and Christina and I went away for some just Christina Kellen time with the dog, and I brought this along because I knew that it was like a 1 hour-ish interaction but more Euro game that was super beautiful that I knew I could get to the table and played one evening. And so Christina and I sat down and played River of Gold. So this is set in I don't know. It's set in one of these worlds. I don't know. You know what world it's set in. It's the five.
Oh, the five kingdoms?
Yeah. Well, I actually don't know anything. Like we played, I don't know anything. Someone quote that. No, so we played Battle for Rokugan is set in the same world. It's like one of Fantasy Flight's, like The Legend of the Five Rings. Okay. I know nothing about The Legend of the Five Rings.
Neither do I.
It's not real.
I don't believe so.
The rings. It's a fictional setting. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is like, it's like Lords of Waterdeep to D&D is Legend of the Five Rings to River of Gold. This is a game where you are building buildings along a river. You are fulfilling contracts, and you are trying to get influence with the different ring clans. But a lot, I don't know. I guess I should read the box.
It works.
Seize wealth and power on the River of Gold. But this is a stunning production. There is foil on the cover of this box, Mark. Consider that. No. It's done tastefully. The whole box is like normal, and then the river is gold foil. And then the board, gold foil. The river is like holographic. They killed it. The production is like a 12 out of 10 here. And it's really a game that is driven by dice. And I imagine that's probably the biggest complaint here is that on your turn, basically on a previous turn, you'll have rolled a dice 1 through 6, and then all of your choices are going to be based on what you roll. So you can do one of 3 things on your turn, Mark. You can sail down the river. You have 2 boats. One of them can sail the value that you did. Or you can build a building, and you must build a building in the region depicted on your dice. So similarly, going 1 through 6 from the top of the river to the bottom, there are sections of the board. You have buildings with which you can build, and that will get you influence with that faction. And then the third thing you can do is fulfill contracts. You have cards that have resources that you need to acquire that give you permanent ongoing abilities and things that change the game. So essentially, you are trying to do the best that you can with a die result, which makes for a light and airy sort of affair because you just ultimately can't control everything. You have the ability to affect your die result with a certain currency where you can sort of go from 5 to 6, 6 to 1, 1 to 2, and you're allowed to use that as many times as you want. But ultimately, the game is super breezy. I really like the feature in games, and this game has it, where you have the ability to build buildings, and then from then on, when anyone else uses those buildings, you get a benefit. So you're like stacking the river. I think Lords of Waterdeep, you can do this. Keyflower, you can do this. What else? Kalis, right? Granddaddy
right.
of them all. Maybe that's in Kalis. There's a lot of games that do this, but I love this in this game because you are actually choosing where on the river to place your buildings. And so then suddenly it becomes this spot where it's like Christina's like, I'm never going to that part of the river. Like, I will do everything in my power to skip that part because you're getting too many benefits because you've like built up all along the shoreline. There are some other mechanisms going on where there's sort of a couple of cards that are determining, be the first to have influence in every faction, to get a bonus. There's not a lot here that is unique, but altogether from how quick playing it is and how smooth it all operates, I think it's quite strong. I do wonder if I have been tricked by the holographic river, just looking at it. Do you know what I mean? I just like looking at it.
Absolutely. No, I get it. I got a chance to play this a couple times some time ago on BGA, so I can't speak to how alluring the holographic river is, but I do remember enjoying myself and thinking that I get how the dice rolling mechanism could be like frustrating for some people because they can't control what the dice do, but I do remember like being able to mitigate to some extent and also enjoying the puzzle of, okay, well, this is the dice that has been rolled for me, and now I've got to figure out what's the best way to do it, because you do have options. You can, again, move one of two boats, you can build, so there's ways to do your best with a poor roll. And I don't remember ever feeling in that game that like I really got crushed by a bad roll. I remember always feeling like even on rolls that were not what I wanted, I felt like I could do something that was beneficial.
Yeah, I think they've done a smart job, by having two different boats on the river, right? One of the two of them might need to go, and then you've got these cards in your hand. So there's a lot of stuff. It is a very modern Euro. I do feel like everything that you can think of when you think of modern Euro is represented here, but I did find the player interaction to be just enough for me. I was able to like beat Christina by getting every public objective one turn before she was going to, and it was, let me tell you, it was a very loud affair when I was just sort of sniping in and stealing stuff.
Yeah.
But then also setting up the board for the river spaces that you want, and then each faction is a race for influence because first place gets certain amount of points, second place gets this. So it also plays really quickly. This feels like I can't think of a reason to like recommend it highly, highly, highly above other types of Euro games, but I would say for the length and for the investment, I'm really happy with this. I'm glad I picked it up. It's been sitting on my shelf of shame since it came out. And I think a lot of people had this like really high on their top games of last year list, but it's just not one that we got around to playing. Yeah, River of Gold. I would love to do it at 4. I do think, this sort of bouncing around into each other's buildings would be more apparent there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I'm really grateful for is some of the contracts that you fulfill with these people, they give you endgame scoring. And it's not the boring endgame scoring where it's like, you can only have max 1. If you get the same guy like multiple times, each of your leftover resources is worth like double points then.
Right.
And so you can really get like cumulative benefits there. And I'm like, I love that. Why do they limit you? Like, breaking the game, again, you can't break this game, let's be clear, is fun.
Yeah.
But don't make it boring.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Write that down, designers. Don't make it boring.
I'm glad that you like this because I remember after playing it, because like you said, it's nothing necessarily you've seen for the first time. It's nothing necessarily super fresh. And after playing it, I thought to myself, this might not be a game you like because it is like a sort of mixing of, even though the way that they put this together, the recipe is good, is like among the better that I've seen when it comes to like putting in older stuff in a new way. I didn't think, because in general, you're not the biggest fan of Euros, but seeing the brevity of it and the interaction worked for you is good. I'm happy to see that for sure.
Yeah, it kind of is like if someone told me they wanted to play modern board games and they were, I was like, okay, do you want to play Social Deduction? Do you want to play, some of my favorite type of games? But this feels representative of like just Euro-y. It's like, I'm not going to play Trois with these people.
Right.
I'm not going to play Keyflower with this kind of person. Like it's just not going to happen, even though that's what let's play Root here, everybody. But
sure.
Like, I think this... I think maybe my brain is just so focused on the word river, but do you remember that game, The River? It was like sort of like intro to
Days of Wonder.
It was like baby's first.
Yeah.
Yeah. A big Days of Wonder release. This feels like almost what I would slot into that, maybe because of The River. It's a full replacement for The River from... I don't know why you're laughing. 2018, 2024, things have changed. Now The River is made of gold.
What are other games that can be replaced by by other games with similar titles? I'm trying to think of that now. Don't mess with Cthulhu being replaced by Cthulhu Wars. What other game?
I was going to say just add of gold to things.
Oh, that's true.
Make anything
Natural.
better.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing for designers to write down while they're writing down tips from you. They should write that down.
Yeah, it's like Cascadero of gold.
Yeah.
And I'm already more interested because is a Cascadero.
That's true. That's a good point.
All right, so let us move right into our feature topic. We don't have Neil in here to bog us down with another game for the upfront, so we can get right into pricing, Mark.
Yes.
We are here to talk about pricing of board games. This is a hot topic, so we're just going to wade right into it like we always do.
We don't hide from controversy like Neelan. Neelan's always trying to get us to talk about boring stuff. Keep it PC, Neelan says. Let's not ruffle any feathers. And we keep trying to break out of that mold,
leaves, and we're ready.
That's right.
Show us how much money you have. Let's start there, Mark.
Right.
Let's count down from 3. No, this was inspired by a topic on BGG, and it was basically just, what does a game have to offer you for you to spend $125 on it? And I was sort of like, at first I was like, well, that's crazy. That's a lot of money. And then a couple of later down in the thread, I noticed that people were talking about there is a new Twilight Imperium expansion. Okay. Twilight Imperium expansion 2025 called Thunder's Edge. And it is MSRP'd at $130. So this isn't like necessary. And again, tariffs, there's a lot that we're not going to wade into, but like everything costs more now, inflation, right? And so that isn't to say that this game couldn't be worth $130, but this is a more heuristic for you. What would it take to get you to drop $125 on a game? This is very U.S. focused. Let's see, $125, Mark. How many times could you get fast food for yourself with $125?
Oh, I am not the guy to ask.
We're trying to, you know what I mean? Like, how much does a banana cost?
That's great. This is a great question, but I'm telling you, I'm not the guy for this because when it comes to fast food, I am value menu guy. When I get fast food, generally, I'm getting it to fill myself up for the lowest amount of money. So you give me $125, I could break that into, what is that? 25 meals. $5. I think $5 a meal is what I could do.
Okay, and I think a reasonable person in the U.S., if you're getting a drink, if you're getting a combo,
give me a water.
Water's
free. Water's still free, Kellen.
$10 to $12 to $15. So you're looking at anywhere from like 7 to 10 times. Again, don't do the math on that, but
sure.
We're just trying to help our non-U.S. folks here. So if you're a cheapskate like Mark, you could go 20 times to the store, or if you're a normie like me who likes Baja Blast, sue me. You.
That is your kryptonite.
Yeah. Now that we've established how much a banana costs, Mark, $125 for a board game. What does it have to have?
Okay. Again, I'm going to be speaking for the frugal listeners out there, so non-frugal listeners, take this with a grain of salt. But 125 for me is going to take a lot. For 125, I have to know that the gameplay is going to be good. I have to know that. It has to be either reviewed well, or it has to be by a designer I trust. That is like the first thing that is inescapable. I can't think of a situation where I would take a gamble on a game whose gameplay I didn't really feel like I was sure about. So that's number one. The other thing is, for 125, I have to get my money's worth in terms of like components, or just honestly volume. Like there has to be a lot of stuff. And that is a really basic, probably a little crass answer, but that's honestly the truth. Like if I'm going to be shelling out that much money for a game, you've got to have nice components. Again, there is an overproduced thing, so I don't really necessarily want components for components' sake, or huge components, like oversized components. I guess that's the bigger thing. But you gotta give me some, like, you gotta put gold leaf on my boxes, like River of Gold, or you gotta give me like
gold foil.
Yeah, something. You gotta do like unique meeples. Like every faction has their own unique meeples. There has to be a table presence wow factor for me to consider going to 125 for a game. What about you, Kellen?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that, obviously everyone is going to be different here. So
sure.
Like there's like financial privilege associated here, because and things change over time, because even when we started this podcast, I was at a different financial place than I probably am now, right? Sort of late 20s to now, kind of being more established in a career. But $125 is like a threshold. I'm trying to look through like where I would have spent $125 is definitely like Kickstarters, right? So
sure.
The Cthulhu Wars of the world. I don't know that Blood Rage, the original, cracked that much, but I think it was 99. To sort of go look.
I think it was 99.
Yeah. Well, I know Rising Sun definitely cracked that much, but I think that over time, that has changed. And there have been games that I've dropped that much. But it is sort of like at what Guards of Atlantis 2, right? I think I paid more than $125 for. And again, that's a ton of minis in the box kind of vibe.
Sure.
The sort of value is there. Even though like that doesn't really translate into the things that I like or care about. Yeah, Rising Sun was a $200 pledge. And again, this was in 2018, so that would have cost quite a bit more now, just with inflation, I think. But I do not think, for instance, there's no flyers happening at $125.
Yeah.
I'm not just like, maybe I will like this thing. So it would have to be a deluxe version of a game that I already trust the designer, right? Like it's Carl Chudyk, it's shiny, it's glowing, maybe glowing. If it was glowing, definitely.
Sure.
But even then, then the question becomes, okay, so take some of my top 50 games, let's call it, and if they made a deluxe version, would I drop 125 on them? And honestly, the answer is, in most cases, probably not.
I agree.
What about you?
Yeah,
top
I
10?
agree with that. I mean, obviously the joke is going to be first Biblios, of course. And in no world would I pay $125 for a copy of a deluxeified Biblios in any universe, as much as I like that game. But if you're talking about a game that has...
Okay, but like you've gotten $125, you've gotten way more value out of Biblios than games that you probably have spent over $100 on.
Well, 100%,
frankly.
of course. Definitely, without a doubt. I mean, for sure. But no orientation or no configuration of Biblios with any sort of souped up upgrades or anything is going to warrant $125, even though it is my favorite game of all time. Just you can't make that game into a $125 game, in my opinion, that is worth it. And again, with all the caveats that this is for like a U.S. person living in the U.S. and all the people come from different economic situations for sure. But if we're talking about other games that are in my top 50. A good example is Agricola. There was just a new Agricola that was kickstarted by, I think it was Awakened Realms or something.
That was crazy looking.
Yeah, it looks
like, I don't know if I loved it, but like, wow. Did you love it? You loved the look.
I liked it, but for me, I'm happy with original Agricola, but that does feel like a game that I could see myself potentially going 125. In most cases, if there had been no original Agricola, and I knew Uwe Rosenberg was coming out with a farming game that it was touted as being an amazing experience or an amazing game, and it looked like the way this souped up Agricola looks, I could then see myself saying, okay, you know what? This actually is worth it because it's Uwe Rosenberg doing what he does best. It's being highly touted with these reviews, and it looks amazing. That is a situation where I could see myself. Because Agricola already exists, I'm less inclined to get a souped up version. And I think a souped up version in general is a restriction for me. Like, if the game already exists in an okay version, I'm less inclined to spend for the deluxeified edition, although it gives me, again, some like reassurance that the game itself is going to be good, obviously because it's already existent. But then I would say to myself, well, why do I need to buy it again? In general, that would be my stance.
Do you find that this has priced you out of games just over the course of maybe the last 10 years? Because like MSRPs are definitely creeping up.
Yeah. And again, like we've mentioned before, and anybody who's been in the hobby will know that this can be a quite expensive hobby. And
sure,
a peek behind the kimono, as we like to say, like we generally don't get very many review copies. So we're not necessarily like awash in review copies as a podcast. So we do generally source most of the games ourselves. And so price is a factor. But one thing that I've done, and this is throwing sort of a monkey wrench into the very essence of this topic, but I do a lot of trades, and that's a way that I find around having to spend a lot. But I'm generally not a Kickstarter guy, and the raising of prices on Kickstarter has made me even less so because, you know, there is a lot of like really cool productions out there. Kickstarter and GameFound have led to an incredible rise in the level of production for games, but not necessarily the quality. Like you could find a ton of flash in the pans where they look really nice, but when they come out after 4 or 5 months, nobody's talking about them and nobody really wants to play those games again. And so you add the rising price tags with the like hit and miss nature of Kickstarter and GameFound. And so yeah, the rising price is even more of like a disincentive to go after those games for me in general.
Is there a psychological difference between like 99 and 125?
I think for me there are. I mean, and we can go into this like a little bit later too, but I find myself with definitely like different thresholds when it comes to the prices of games. Like for me, there is, for whatever reason, and I think maybe because this seemed to be the line of like what a new game coming out was when I first started the hobby. But for me, one line of demarcation when it comes to pricing is around $35. Like $35 for a new game. And I know this is even like less and less possible nowadays, but I think for like non-deluxeified games, a lot of them, when they're coming out, if they're not super big or anything, do hover in the $35 range for whatever reason, whatever the case of the actual market. Like for me, 35 is a threshold. If a game is more than $35 and it's new, it's going to take a little something at least to get me to get it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think one of the interesting things is I've always sort of thought of this hobby as more affordable than others, because like the idea that for $20 to $35 you could buy a new experience, you know what I mean, that
sure.
that could be replayed usually infinitely, that feels like attainable. And again, attainable is different for every household, so like I can only speak from my experience, but you know, it's like, oh, once a month I can buy myself a new board game. I really hope this is going to be awesome, but it's also not, you know, my hobby is not like fancy car driving or golf, you know, where the drivers are hundreds of and perhaps thousands of dollars. So I've always kind of thought of it as a more economical hobby. But as these numbers change, you know, so does the thinking that you has to go into it before you just like buy a game without doing a ton of research.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And even compared to like things like going to movies, the price of like tickets going up. So yeah, in a lot of ways it is more economical. But then if you ever step over that line from being like a person who buys board games to a board gamer, everybody falls down that rabbit hole where they just have that acquisition frenzy where they're buying a bunch of games, and then that's dangerous and often a thing that a lot of people like fall into when they get in the hobby, and it can get things quite expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've done quite a few episodes, right, on the difference between like buying, and it's always like what is like a crucible or the thing, my whale that I'm always talking about, like whether your hobby is buying things or playing the games, and I feel like I've come up with like 700 different topics so that we can just keep talking about it.
Sure.
I think because I have like an addictive personality that wants to collect things irrationally maybe, and then rationally I'm sort of like, I should probably just save my money. But I don't know. I do, you know, I think I guess the last piece of this for me, Mark, is then how do we factor in pricing when we think about like reviewing a game? And I say this because, Christina and I were just in Big Bear. We were reviewing, we use this app called Belly to review restaurants and stuff. And we went to this like bar and grill and got wings during the Bronco game, right? And so there are like multiple factors, right? We're in Big Bear, okay? So you're not going to get all the best food of LA, right? So that factors into how you review this restaurant. And then the price, it's a little bit overpriced because they have less access to, you got to get all the stuff up the mountain. Sure. But like on a purely objective level, I'm like, holy shit, how much did I just spend at the bar and grill? Right. So all of that to say, like, when you're reviewing, and I think another easy example is In-N-Out, okay? Because all the idiots, and you can bleep that out, all the idiots online who critique In-N-Out are not acknowledging that it's like $7 or $8 in comparison to like 14 from Five Guys. And so when you are reviewing, quote unquote, a board game, how do you factor price in, if at all?
Yeah, it's really tricky because, again, with all the caveats we've been doing, like that's something that's built in because you don't know if mentioning a game costs $50 or whatever is even a factor for some people or whatever. And so it's always like a sort of like a little touchy of a subject to consider. And also for me, the reason I think I don't bring it up often is because most of the times that I acquire games are through trades or things like that. So I usually do acquire them secondhand. So often it's not something that I super consider when acquiring a game, but it is a factor when it comes to reviewing games. I think like I'm trying to think of the last time I reviewed a very expensive game. I think like, for example, when I review a game that's expensive because it's out of print and hard to find, I think I try to always mention that if I'm aware of the situation.
Yeah. Like if you want to if this sounds awesome,
you're in trouble.
Sorry. Bro.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something I will try to always mention in those situations. I think with other games that are expensive because their MSRPs are high, I think I will mention them. Or if I don't, I am regretful that I haven't, because I think that is something to consider. I wouldn't really want to recommend a game here without mentioning that it costs $75 or more or something. Like, I think that feels like actually a line to me. Like if a game was $50, I might not feel compelled to mention the price because that feels like maybe what people would imagine the going rates are. But if a game was going for $75 or more and I didn't mention that, and I'm sure I haven't, I'm sure I'm guilty of this a bunch of times, but I think that's something important to note, because if somebody were recommending a game to me that costs $100, $125, whatever, and they hype me up on it and never mention that, hey, this is going to set you back $100, I might feel a little shortchanged. And again, I know I've been guilty of this. And again, for many people, not mentioning that, or that might not even be a consideration. They might say like, hey, either I've got the money to spend on it because I allot this amount of money to my hobby, or like this is so good that I don't care, or whatever their case may be. But for me, I would want to know that. So this is actually opening my eyes and making me more cognizant of doing that in the future, because I do think that's important.
Yeah, I think that I've been thinking a lot about the iterative nature of board game design, and trying to figure out who to recommend a game like River of Gold to, versus the 700 other Euro efficiency type games that have come out. And that's not even a pejorative, but like one way that you could split things up is like, well, if table presence is important to you, here's the $100 game, but actually these three games are $20, and you would like it probably just as much, or they're pretty much the same type of experience. Yeah, I don't think we talk about price enough, and I think to your point, some of it perhaps comes from sort of that bashfulness of like, what is $30 to you is not $30 to me, and then there's this sort of, some people are seeking out games to get for big groups where they're splitting the cost of things, and so maybe price isn't a factor. And we may have talked about it here, and it may just be super trite. I always think about like the adage that like when you're young, you have unlimited time and no money, and then when you're old, you might have unlimited money but no time.
Yeah.
And so the way that I, Kellen, evaluate games in 2025 has more to do with time than it does money.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say I have unlimited money, because please send us money, send me money. I'd be happy to receive. But like it is more like, when I get to the end of a new game and we all just played it and it's terrible, I just think, man, I wasted that chance, on a Friday night with Mark and Neelan, and how many of these do I get per year? Not like at bats, right? As opposed to like, oh my God, I just spent $40 on this piece of shit.
That is really, really true. Like, I've just played a couple of games with my game group that fell completely flat, and the frustration I had as the game was going, like, we started playing the game and I could tell, like, this is just going to be like a dud. This is just it wasn't necessarily even a bad game. They were just like sort of boring experiences. And I remember thinking in the midway through, like, oh my God, I'm going to do another 30 minutes of this and, it's going to be fine. Nobody's going to be angry at this. This is not a bad game, but like that time could have been used somewhere else. Could have been used like a good game or an interesting game at the very least. And I think maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, my frustration might have been like, oh, I wasted this money on this game. Whereas now, as you're saying, like the time is such a big factor when it comes to what my valuation is on a game. In terms of valuation, board gaming is an interesting hobby in that the secondary market is such a big factor or a big opportunity or a way to acquire games. Like, in other hobbies, there's not like such a space for used or trading. So while we're talking about money and the consideration, I'm just going to, again, just put out there, like, if money is a issue for you for whatever reason, you don't want to spend as much on board games or whatever the case is, I'm always going to tout or back or support the idea of trading games, because that can be like a sub hobby, a really fun sub hobby in and of itself. So just, again, whenever we're talking about finances or the economics of board games, I always want to put out the idea of trading being a thing you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at the secondary market makes me feel like most, how many hobby board gamers are there in the US? Like, someone would have that data, but it sometimes feels like it's like the same 10 to 20,000 people buying every 2025 game and then getting rid of 9 out of 10 of them the next year for like 1/4 the price. So if you draft, off a thing like a board game podcast or just like what was hot last year, you're out of the zeitgeist, but you're also going to spend like less than half, I would say. Maybe even, that might even be generous to say half.
And that's a great point you make, because like no matter how hot a game is or no matter the situation, the cycle you're talking about always happens. There's going to be, a super hot game. There's a percentage of the population of the board gaming community that is going to buy it. And then like clockwork, give it 2 months, give it 4 months, give it 6 months. There's a percentage of that group that bought the game that is going to now sell it or trade it or something. So I can't think of many situations where a person who is interested in a game but doesn't want to pay full MSRP couldn't get around it by just waiting and trading or buying it off the secondary market or something. We're fortunate in the board gaming hobby to have other outlets to get these things that we want for, less, or for trading or for whatever.
Yeah, and so all of that in mind, do you think when you're looking at movies and restaurants and like no one talks about movies or books from a pricing perspective, but they kind of do in restaurants. I guess it's just like why not have price be a huge component of this?
Yeah, it's interesting because us talking about this, honestly, like I'm half inclined, we always want to talk about the publisher of the game and the designer of the game.
Sure.
Like, what MSRP might not be a bad. I mean, it's also difficult because if we're reviewing an older game, MSRP is like not going to be so much of a factor anymore because the game may not be in print or whatever. But it like I wouldn't be against the idea of upfront mentioning the MSRP because I do think that is a pertinent piece of information.
Yeah, man. Prices are pricing.
Yeah, although Neelan would never let us talk about that again. Neelan tries to keep everything.
Yeah, like but.
Milk
That's
toast.
Why we had to tell all here.
Yeah, exactly.
Open your wallets. I think that is going to do it for our thoughts on what it would take for us to buy a $125 game. I've done it. Mark claims he hasn't, but he has. And Neelan won't tell you. He's censoring himself. So let that help with your rankings of your favorite host of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Thank you so much to Heart Society Music for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. Thank you so much to everyone who listens to the show, who talks with us in Discord. You can talk to us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com, or you can find us on Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord.
And of course, if you're going to discuss this on the podcast channel, we ask that everybody starts their message by sharing their either net worth or annual salary. That's not part of this podcast discussion.
Then how much a banana costs
right
in their region.
Yes, maybe do that. Do not give out any financial information, but do tell us the prices of bananas in your area. I will say for us, I get a banana for 23 cents at Trader Joe's. That is the going rate here.
Are you serious? I actually was going to say I have actually no idea how much a single banana costs. And Trader Joe's is not a grocery store, so not relevant.
Sure.
We can end this here.
Sure.
You agree. All right. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.